Figma is going to use AI in our products. How? I talked to Gus Griffin to find out a little bit more. Gus is a researcher at Figma in charge of analyzing, understanding, and recommending how Figma might change its products with AI. My name's Andrew Hogan, head of insights at Figma, and this is FigBrew. FigBrew is part of an internal series that we do in order to understand what's happening in the industry, what's changing, and, well, we thought you might want to see some of it too. Hope you enjoy. Gus, I want to ask you about AI feature fatigue. From your position as a researcher at Figma, working on AI products and features, what do you think about AI feature fatigue? Overblown, the right level of blown going on? What are you seeing?
Not overblown, underblown, I would say.
Underblown. The AI feature fatigue is more real than people think that it is.
Let's hit you with some numbers I was looking at.
Numbers. Okay.
Yeah, numbers, believe it or not. Even from a qualitative researcher, sometimes we use numbers. There's a website called There's an AI for that. They're tracking all of the AI tooling releases since, I guess, November 2023. 11,601 AI tools. And mind you, this was as of 2 weeks ago, that do 16,604 different AI-powered tasks. I don't know about you, but I definitely haven't tried 11,000 tools. I don't even know if I could name 100 that are super, super useful and, integral.
I'm going to do one today, but that's sort of how I feel. You just keep finding these things and you're like,
exactly. You keep finding them. And part of that, just to say, removed from the context of our work lives or anything, it's like, okay, that's just a bunch of stuff. It doesn't matter. But it does matter because, for us, we're working on these AI things, these AI products, these AI features, these AI systems, and there's so much noise. All of these features, for instance, at Figma, I've been a part of different efforts to create AI tracker tools. I've been a part of tons of conversations where, we're building and then a new tool comes out and then it's like, oh, we need to stop and consider this tool or tear it down. It distracts us. And one of the things at Figma, we have all these internal Slack channels that help us follow all of these big, to small releases of AI things, to 11,601.
When you say tear it down, you mean like break down what is it that they're doing in order to learn from it? Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. But they're coming every single day, right? Every single day. It feels like you have to do this keeping up with the Joneses of another AI release. And, it's really amazing. We all have to start somewhere, but it can really take our eye off the ball. It can, feel like, hey, look at all these like really beautiful, pretty curtains that everyone's putting out that are grabbing attention or getting funding. But the hard work about AI isn't making the curtains. It's about actually building the foundations, and when you're building a house, you wouldn't start with the curtains, right? You'd start with pouring the concrete, making sure it's sturdy, figuring out what is the system that we want to build and launch, multiple AI-enabled experiences on, not just AI-powered features.
And where should you put the foundation? Sounds like you may have AI feature fatigue. I believe you've also done some research and other people are experiencing it too. Like it's not just the 16,000, it's also what happens when you talk to people about the AI features that they're using?
Yeah. And so a lot of my research stems from talking to everybody from the AI power users to the AI, hesitant to even the folks that won't use them. And I think what's really happening is the fatigue is coming. And when I talk to them, they're seeing all of these AI tools out there and they're like, everything that they're doing is just trying to replace something I already do with another digital tool, whether it's writing, editing. And yes, they can speed you up and they're helpful, but there's this like really big kind of replacement thinking happening that people are pushing up against where it's like, why does this have to be done with AI? Why is this the thing? Why is this the way? And you can tell me efficiency, 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 but there's got to be something else. Efficiency is nice. But, the people I talk to, they want more. Efficiency plus, is it creativity? Is it optionality? In the design world, one thing we think a lot of is it's not just design variation, right? And, we've done some big surveys with our design community. We've had a lot of discussions with them. What about, trying to create different variations and expanding the scope of optionality in the ways we can approach problems and solve problems differently, not just move through the same old thing faster and faster. We're not actually adding value. We're saying, we can actually add value by taking things away, which is time spent, which is actually a weird model. And as a result, a lot of these users are becoming disenchanted with it. Even some of the power users where they're like, yeah, I found one or two things. I think that the premier example is the engineers we speak with or the the designers and that are on the cusp of coding and talking about GitHub Copilot. But what else?
There's some fatigue out there. Obviously, Figma's exploring these things. We've talked about them. What sort of prompted this kind of perspective? Like, what was the impetus behind thinking about this and consolidating it? Tell me a little bit about that. I believe you may have done a retrospective of AI inside Figma for about the year you've been working on it. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I guess this is a good time to, provide that context. So I do work at Figma on a lot of new product areas, a big one being AI. And I bring a user research focused lens, and I work really closely with engineers, designers, PMs, and that's what I've been spending pretty much all my time doing. And what I put together was kind of three big reflections from working with this team at Figma as we've tried to create the foundations and enable AI across our platforms. We're trying to define what those experiences will look like inside of, Figma design. And again, the feature fatigue, we can get so caught up thinking about, okay, what is Figma building? What are we doing? What's happening? But my reflections are actually about how building products with teams is changing. And I thought it was an important thing to step back from the features, try to pull our heads out of the feature fatigue and the noise and say, how is this actually shifting, what's happening? In back at Last Config, we talked about how AI is going to shift, what we design, how we design, and who designs. And that can feel kind of removed when you're not actually in it. But I think actually what's happening is, when we talk about changes to what we design, we're actually having to have to change how we iterate, refine, and launch product experiences. When we talk about, how we create, brand new systems, primitives, design systems and such, it's actually like, how do we actually think about creating those systems that will power innovation, which is changing. And when we talk about, working together with other teams, talking about who designs, it's okay, well, how do we actually change and involve the ways we work together as building teams to actually harness this technology in a productive way for folks?
So it's really meta.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a meta sense of designing AI products is also helping you to think about how design, research, product development as a whole happens today.
Yeah, and I think the result is what AI technology and its kind of omnipresence is actually forcing us to do is to reimagine this product building playbook. And I gave a talk at a conference focused on AI. I was one user researcher, I think, that presented there in a sea of designers, engineers, marketers, demoing features. But I wanted to bring our perspective on the shifting nature of the product building process and the product building playbook. And I shared some lessons that I think teams can take forward to try to help nail this, not just for themselves and for their companies, but actually to showcase how much good this technology can do for folks.
Let's talk about the lessons, but I also want to hear some concrete examples. Are there a few moments in this process that stick out at you at wow, this was different?
The first one I remember, we had really begun a deep collaboration with the team we brought on in Diagram, folks who had been working on AI and design for multiple years, right? People that were experienced. And I remember talking with my ML researcher, the tech researcher counterpart, super brilliant person. And we just kind of started talking about hey, how can I help in this process? How can I help us build and provide the research and the perspectives that are really handy and necessary? And we got into this big discussion and we started talking about, when user research can actually be important, when the voice of the individual and people can actually be really important. And he just started reflecting with me, he's like, the hardest thing about this is that people put so much emphasis on the technology up front. They just think about, oh, it's just a technology, it's the technology. And they forget that the hard work now isn't getting the technology up and running, especially with some of the platforms we have to enable us and, the models that we have out there. It's actually in going that last mile to say that when it feels like you're done, you're not. And from that, I really started to think about how that's totally shifting the workload and division of effort in the product building process, basically totally splitting where we focus on the product and design in the process versus the tech. And that was really powerful for me. We still talk about that all the time. And we tried to both work within it, but also think about how we can repurpose it to be more helpful for our teams. So that's one, just thinking about the ML research perspective and the tech perspective.
This was a surprise to you, right? You thought oh, we're pretty close.
I thought we were very close. We had poured a lot of effort and resources into getting the tech to actually work, some really cool stuff. And we had kind of just plugged the tech into the Figma interface. And we were like, this is going to be game changer. This is going to be awesome. And the technology is really cool. Don't get me wrong. Both we started talking to people and testing it. We were like, this is not going to work. Those little things. And that's not a problem for us. I mean, that's part of the product building process.
That's the iteration part. You test with people, you put it in front of people, you get their reactions. There is more iteration than I think you expected.
Completely. And the thing I work with now is, we all have this former, playbook of how product building is supposed to go, where the first 70% is kind of joint exploration by all the stakeholders involved, right? And then the last 30% is all about, really building, polishing, and then shipping. And with AI, I think what we're seeing is that so much emphasis is of that process is changing, and it's actually becoming a bifurcated process where the first 70% is all about the technology. What I just talked about with our experience, we were like so focused on just getting this technology, and me as a researcher coming in and being like, oh, I can't wait till we just like get to polish this and ship it. No, now because it's bifurcated, we take that other 30%, we focus all of our effort on the product and design. And it's not creating this like iterative space where, engineering would be informing design, would be user research or vice versa, be taking the product, figuring out product market fit. We're actually now doing all of those things around product market fit, around design, around research at the end, once we have the technology.
They're compressed. The time is compressed.
Exactly. Okay. It's really been an interesting journey, because with all of these tools we have to build prototypes and things with AI, to have kind of just a general, interface or plug it into a product surface, it can feel like it's done at 70%, but it's not done, right? You have to go the final 30%. Anything if you're buying anything in the market, right, and they only give you 70% of it, you're not going to be happy. You take a flight 70% of the way, you're not going to get where you need to go, even if it's on a really fast, awesome plane. You buy, a really beautiful, brand new HD TV, highest resolution ever, but they give you 70% of it, you're going to be really angry. And it's on us to say, okay, just because we feel like the tech is there, we have to take it the final 30%. So we're not giving something to people that feels 70% of the way there.
So take it outside of Figma. Do you think that this is a temporary thing that is happening while we're in sort of a transition period? We're like a year into like generative AI sort of like exploding on the scene, maybe a little bit longer? Or do you think that this is sort of just the way that it is now?
I'll speak to what I know, which is doing research with designers primarily, right? And in my research, when I talk to designers that are working with AI, trying to figure it out, what they tell me is indicating that it's actually a more permanent problem than we'd like to believe. That it's becoming really hard for designers to explore the actual product solutions, the different interfaces, the different ways we want to approach users and actually apply this AI in the hands of the people that are supposed to be using it when they're working on these AI features. They don't have the space to explore, and oftentimes they're being told to wait to explore, to wait to think about, what is the end state we want to get to, having some input from the engineers about, we think we can do this, but okay, what is it going to be? How can I explore? And they're not getting the space to really engage and do these explorations. This is one of the things that just as a kind of lesson inside of Figma, we learned with our first big AI solution, Jambot, a plugin, where we built the tech side of it so fast, and we were like, great, we're going to be so fast out there. But once it was built, we realized there's a lot of design thinking to go into this, a lot of design iteration to go into this, a lot of, product thinking to go into this. So right up until launch, we were then crunched in this, 30%. We were like, we didn't give ourselves the space to kind of think about what the right solution is. So we were just jamming, iterating right until the end, trying to fit this tech into a great user experience. I think that's become like a canonical example. And I think we got to a place with Jambot where we were really happy. But as we look back and retroed it, we were like, wow, that could have been different,
Yeah.
And we could have really solved the problem at both ends rather than having this bifurcated 70-30 split where 70 is tech and then you save it for the end.
That's the sort of the idea of the 70-30 split and the potential for compressing, thinking about user experience and thinking about product market fit and all the things that are really important. being compressed. What are some other examples that you've sort of had that have helped you to realize some things along the way?
Again, speaking with that engineer on our team, very senior engineer at Figma, I remember I just put out a big report in this kind of new area we were exploring. And he wrote me on Slack and goes, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And I was like, "Oh no." What did I say in this report? Is it wrong for what we're building on the tech side? Am I in trouble? So I kind of came in like a little coy to the meeting, and he's just like, "Hey, can we just talk about this whole thing that we're doing? Just like the whole solution space, what's going on, what's happening? I need someone to help me make sense of this. I just need a thought partner." I was like, I don't really code. I don't really design. I make slides, but I don't really design. He's like, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for someone who can help me think through the sets of challenges we need to solve as a team. And I thought there was something really amazing about that. Something that speaks to kind of a shift in how we imagine, putting together product building teams. What it really speaks to, I think, is breaking down this like traditional, cross-functional team model we have. And at Figma, I think, oftentimes led by these engineers saying we need to bring our other people closer into the process and work as a unit rather than in these silos, because we're moving so fast. The technology is changing so quickly. We need to be really buttoned up. And honestly, the siloed work where it's the designer, PM, engineers, researchers working alone, it's not going to help us move, with the agility and, actually open up the spaces for creative problem solving that we need to actually harness this. It's been really amazing to kind of engage in this way, to think about, if we're all together with different perspectives, how can we ask what if in a more powerful way for this, and it speaks to, again, that 70-30 split. This is a way to help overcome that split. You start to put the pieces together and you start to see, well, maybe we can overcome that by actually bringing everybody together in a more coherent way, in a way that says, here's this ambiguous thing with this powerful technology that's rapidly changing. How do we work with it? When we flip to developing with mobile and when we flip to developing with, products with the internet, this is a lot of what you hear back in the day. I don't know if it's net new, but it's like you have these new technologies and we realize there's a great way of working it with it, which is without silos, with bringing unique perspectives together. And we're relearning that lesson now. It's not necessarily a new lesson, but it's one that I've been staunchly reminded by just the ways that folks are bringing me into meetings, asking for perspectives and asking each other, is this the right way to solve this problem? Is this the right way to think about it? Which is really cool. I think the lesson here for me is you really have to break out of your lane. You have to try to master someone else's lane, because it's not easy to come into those meetings where you're not in your silo and start to try to speak someone's language, right? Really, that's like the biggest empathy you can show, is to try to speak someone else's language and see the problem, how they're seeing it, so you can actually come together and find a better solution. And that's been, I think, really one of the amazing things about trying to work on AI at Figma, is that we're slowly starting to kind of disintegrate these silos and just kind of work together and say, we got to figure this out. How?
You have this, break out of your lane, master someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine in a lot of other organizations, that's actually pretty challenging. Like, our CTO, Chris, has this idea of roles, not rules, which really promotes the idea of collaboration across groups and encourages that. Let's imagine you're somewhere where that's not sort of like the norm, and you're trying to pick up some language, a different world, a different way of influencing. What are some things that you think might work based on your experience if you were trying to influence in a different kind of organization?
Fantastic question. This was actually the number one question I got after giving this presentation. Designers, developers came up to me, how do you make this happen? It's tough, because it really takes willing parties, and it really takes willing parties to move away from the constructs of, I belong to this organization, and I belong to this organization, and I belong to this organization. I think one of the best things we've done at Figma is create a very buttoned up, logic of, y'all are the people working on the systems level AI at Figma. That's your responsibility. And, that is a top-down mandate, but takes bottom-up buy-in. I think we need to start having conversations with our teammates about how we can figure out the best ways to actually solve these problems. But then there's the daily, right? Sometimes that's out of our control. There's the daily ritual. I think the daily rituals are around a daily, at least 30-minute stand-up. That's probably going to be more like 45 minutes, where you actually open up the space, not just for a stand-up, but for discussion. Actually like saying, you know what, we have this 30 minutes, but we need to hear all these different perspectives of the things that people are working on. And if it goes over, it goes over. And it can be frustrating sometimes. And you can be like, I just want to end this meeting. But what we do is we send an agenda to Slack. Pretty much everyone has their name on it from all the different disciplines, and everybody gets the space to update and then discuss and raise the challenges that they're facing from their perspective. And I think doing that just helps people see like, oh, there are so many different challenges out there that we're trying to figure out. For me, you know, as a researcher, maybe it's like, hey, are we actually like thinking about this solution space like in a good framework based on what we actually see the user need to be for what we're trying to solve? And then I bring the framework up, or maybe I share it, and then all of a sudden the engineer's like, oh, that's so interesting, you know, like we're running, you know, this model on this and this model on this, like maybe we need to combine it. And that space is actually seeing that there's value to be added by all the roles to the immediate work that they're doing. That's like the most important thing. You need to show immediate value in the new perspectives. Stand up is one vehicle for that, but I think that's the biggest thing. Immediate value in sharing knowledge to help shift problem-solving approaches really fast.
You've got this idea of a 70-30 split and the shift there. You've got the idea of like mastering somebody else's role, not that you're going to like do that job, but that it makes you better able to do your job when you understand what they're doing, and stand-ups as a vehicle to do that. What's the third biggest conversation, sort of realization that you had, and maybe like an instance where it came up?
The third one, you know, speaks, I think, to that feature fatigue, to bring it back to where we began, right? And it's actually the lesson around avoiding the velocity trap and remembering that it's the systems that will scale and not the features. The lesson I think here is, so at Figma, right, we started out, and I remember the first big project I did on this was like mapping out the end-to-end kind of designer flow. And we had done some of this, but just doing an updated mapping of like, this is the designer workflow. This is how
creating like a shared artifact.
Exactly. And we went through it. We were like, okay, like, you know, what feature can we like add, you know, value to with AI? Like, or how can we just sprinkle AI on this and sprinkle AI on this and sprinkle AI on this? And it was so refreshing to have some of our leadership come in and be like, whoa, we're not necessarily in the business of sprinkling AI, right? Yes, that can provide value. They tried to shift us to what are the big, you know, systems bets we can make to actually carry this forward across our platforms, across Figma Design and FigJam, and we have dev mode out now, moving into developer tooling. How do we want to sink this in at the roots so it becomes an enabling technology we can build on, right? AI isn't a feature, AI is a technology that we need to work with and build with. Now, when you think of it as a feature, that's great. And it really like aligns with the old way of thinking about this, where, you know, the system is kind of set. We're building on, you know, tech foundations, but mostly tweaking and riffing, you know, adding value to those systems with features. And I think the lesson there is, you know, that our leadership really cued us in on and really pushed us to consider is, if you're not thinking about the system, you're not actually going to innovate anything. And you need to actually rethink the systems you'll be adding feature value into, rather than just trying to add AI value at the feature level. So really it's thinking about experimenting with features, but putting the effort and innovation at the systems level.
I know one of our VPs of product show has described it as sort of the shape of the product. And it sounds like you were trying to keep the product the same shape, and maybe there was a need to think about the shape very differently. And, you know, whether that's the thing that you do or not, it sounds like you have to think about it that way.
Well, it's one of the most difficult parts, though, because they ask us then to think about the system, right? Or we're challenged to think about the system. But often this kind of systems level thinking is happening at organizations on, you know, multi-year time horizons. Yeah. Now we need to do this. And there's this kind of allure of like, well, you know what? Actually, we could just do the features now. Again, the fatigue, the velocity. This is like partly speaking to why we're seeing that. We have so many tools at our fingertips to just, you know, circumvent thinking about the system. We can plug into APIs. We can, you know, call up to whatever LLM. We can put things out there. That's not actually doing the hard work. You know, those are the curtains, not the foundation. We're in this place where we can just throw so many things at the wall and see what sticks. But what sticks isn't what's going to be relevant 5 years from now. And in my research, I think what's been coming more and more apparent as the enabling technology of AI becomes, more prevalent and just the discussion becomes more just everyday and more normal, is they're not asking about the features anymore. They're asking about the systems that are powering the features. So in a B2B world, if someone's asking you, okay, that's cool, like an AI powered pen, but like what's actually powering the pen, like what's actually behind the pen? And what we're seeing is that, these business leaders, these organizations, they don't want an AI powered pen. They want a new pen. So how are we actually going to create that? Because that's going to unlock innovation for us, hopefully, opportunity for our business, and hopefully value for those end users, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, value for the end users is what we're always after. You always want to make things more useful for people than what they have to give up in order to get access to them.
That's right.
I want to close with something that seems worth considering here. You were like a anthropology guy, right? Like,
yeah.
Like that is, I think that's a compelling thing to consider here. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be in this, not just, tech, but, B2B tech, SaaS, a little bit about that, and maybe some things that you use on a daily basis from that kind of very different background.
My background is very much entrenched in the social sciences, from your anthropology to your economics to your sociology. And I kind of chose a lane of anthropology because I believe it gives you the most ability to explore things in depth, in a really concrete way, in the context of people's lives. And there's chaos in the context of people's lives and in the variation that they have. So trying to find patterns in that is what I'm all about. And I've done this at a lot of different companies, a lot of different industry verticals. As a consultant, I've been around a few different tech organizations. And my thing is, if we have a hard problem, we can actually use this like really rich understanding of the problem, whatever the problem is, to really try to get to the heart of what's happening. So I've moved over to AI because this is the most naughty kind of weird problem out there, right? And we can use some of these tools to draw on, and we can frame the questions in such a way that we're not getting caught up in the technology, but we're getting focused on, the value we can provide people, like you said. So for instance, for me, in an anthropological trick is don't actually talk about the thing that you're going to use to power the thing, talk about the thing you want them to do. So I don't talk about AI in my sessions with people. I talk about, what if we did this? And then, obviously they're smart people that I'm talking to. They can make the connection. They see that they're thinking, oh, he's probably talking about AI. But it's distraction because people ultimately don't care about AI. People care about what's it actually going to do for them? What does this mean for me? How's it going to change my life or the way I work with others, the way I move through the world, the job that I have, all of that. So the tools for me are a lot of interview time. I spend tons of time with people, but it's not just free form conversations, right? It's putting together your thoughts and ideas and bringing them and using them as stimuli to advance the conversation. And that takes a lot of upfront work, right? An interview, you don't want to go in and just have a yes/no question. You know this, you're doing it right now. And you don't want to go in, not having any idea yourself of what it is you want to probe into, what you want deeper understanding of. I use FigJam all the time to create these big boards and heuristics to try to get people's reactions to and just solicit something concrete, to stay down.
FigJam is part of the conversations that you're having with people.
Oh, all the time. So that's one thing I do to get them to react to ideas we have at a really granular level, not just kind of up here in the world. The other thing I'm always doing, and I used to love doing this, in person, it's become harder and we need to get back to it, I think. But I'm always just constantly like, please, share your screen, show me what you're doing, talk to me about it in context of your actual world. And then they share the screen. And I'm like, actually, it's weird, but could you just share your whole screen, like not just the one tab or the one window? We live in these digital, devices all the time, and we only share so much with everyone around us. But we need to understand it if we really want to, make digital products better that fit into the context of whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah.
So those are my kind of big missions. The other one I would say is, and it's brutal, but you have to listen a ton. And listening now takes the form of actually diving into all of that. And maybe that's why I said there's so much feature fatigue, because I'm always listening to it, always reading. You build context of what's happening around you by digesting everything. And you have to try to filter it at some point. But that's kind of the main thing. We have to stay attuned and we have to stay up to date with what's happening around us. to understand, how people are reacting and shifting because of the common discourse or because of what's happening.
I asked you that question because I think it's one of the interesting things about Figma and about our approach to AI and about what it seems like we'll all need to find success with the new capabilities that we have. Because we have not changed as as a species, as, humans. We are who we are. And there's this much larger context that all of this stuff lives within. People they want to do a better job so they can get promoted or so they can have more influence or just feel more proud. And ultimately, the products that you make help people with one of those other larger goals. But how can you be successful if you can't study those larger goals, if you don't know the history of where those things come from and what's been uncovered before? I know you and I have had some really interesting discussions about the sources of power in meetings and on projects and on teams. And I just think it's a fascinating backdrop for the kinds of things that we're making that, I'm glad Figma is aware of.
Maybe this talk really isn't, if I put on my research hat, isn't really about a retro on AI. I think in anthropology, we talk about reflexive anthropology, which is locating yourself in all the work that you're doing. And that's what this is. I'm seeing myself inside of, changing ways of doing this work with other people. I'm really doing kind of a mini ethnography on, what's happening at Figma. And that's where these lessons come from, right? They come from our own reflections from the people around me, and they're shaping them actively. I told some stories. Things are changing, and it's good for us to locate ourselves in it and figure out, how do we want to improve to do better for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Gus, thanks so much for sharing your talk, your perspective, some of the stories, some of the ideas. Thanks for joining FigBrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.